Hey everybody, I'm here with Lana Holgado, the artist behind the acclaimed song Hazy, which has just hit its 1 year anniversary. Lana, how are you doing today?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing great.
So,
No, I'm not doing great. I'm recovering from having COVID. But relatively speaking, I'm doing better than I was last week. So that's
yeah,
good.
we love a quick recovery. Take that, long COVID.
Yeah.
Everybody get your vaccines if you haven't already.
hmm Get your
Get
boosters if you're eligible for your boosters.
do check up on that. Okay, so I thought it'd be fun to start this off just by diving into the origins of Hazy. And, I did a little research for this. There's one thing Hazy has in common with Yesterday by the Beatles, Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, and Every Breath You Take by the Police. And that all of these songs, Hazy included, were made because their writer just awoke and couldn't fall back asleep. So why don't you walk us through the very beginnings of the writing process for Hazy?
At the time, I had undiagnosed bipolar 2 disorder. So I think I was coming out of a depressive episode and into not quite a textbook manic episode, but inching up there. Um, and I was up, and it was just, like the clouds had parted and the metaphorical sun was peeking out, but the literal sun was not out yet because it was like 1 a.m. Um, and I had an idea. I had a brilliant idea for a song, and it began with the word hazy. And so I wrote a couple of lines of a song called Hazy over a repetitive guitar ostinato, and I was like, "This is gonna be the symbolicness of the music is gonna be, it's like this droning ostinato to represent, the droning of the haziness, and the lyrics are going to represent that. But then I listened back to it, and it sounded like garbage, essentially. So I completely reharmonized it a couple days later, and that's when I was like, "Oh, this is a real song."
Yeah, that's awesome. So you sort of touched on this, but originally this started off as a song that was played on guitar ostinato, and then it progresses to playing it on the piano, and eventually into the synth fi song that we know and love. What do you think was added when you switched up the musical arrangement in these different phases here?
I think the chord structure brought a lot of character to the song, starting with a dominant seven chord and then a fully diminished chord of that same. So it starts um, G, no, not dominant seven, G major seven into G dominant seven, and it's just that because the major seven is just so big, and then the minor seven is all like scrunched up, like how you play it on the piano. I was just going through and thinking, I'm gonna slap any old chord on here and see what sticks. My former piano teacher, he thought the chord progression was reminiscent of neo soul. The song itself wasn't quite neo soul, but he thought the chord progression was reminiscent of that. And that contributes to the moodiness and the feel of the song, instead of it just being me going "Hey Z" over literally, like, I can't completely recreate it, but it was like "Hey Z, you could call it lazy." Like, it's a completely different vibe.
I got you. Wow, yeah, no. That's the first time I actually heard you play it on guitar. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's completely
it's a
uh,
completely different vibe.
yeah. No, I think like it really does speak more to like even slowing down the pacing of it, which I think you like do when you switch it to piano and like the synth. It really gives it more of that like hazy vibe as opposed to I think sort of like a distorted sound that came through on the guitar.
Yeah, I think it's about 70 BPM, which is, I think, around the ballpark from a lot of lo-fi beats. It's like not too fast, not too slow, and having it be all having it be all virtual instruments also um, gives it a certain feel as opposed to piano or like a piano keyboard sound.
Definitely, yeah. Speaking of the song more thematically, when I first heard it, I told you I thought it was a quarantine song because I thought like, oh, this is the perfect thing that's capturing like the malaise that everybody's sort of going through, where we have these like constant cycles between worry and apathy. But one of the reasons why I think that it hits on a bit more of a universal theme and is able to last so long is that you wrote it pre-quarantine about that sort of feeling. So talk a little bit about what the thesis of it was.
Um, yeah, so I wrote it right before quarantine in January 2020. And the thesis of, I think my thesis statement is in the line, doesn't everybody feel that way? Like, I'm genuinely asking, like, do I have a mental illness or is this normal for people to feel this way? And I think it's a bit of both. I think there is some universalness, universality, I don't know, to it. Like, there's definitely, people can definitely relate to feeling out of it and feeling, you know, like they've given up and just hazy, but the degrees that people experience it can vary, and the duration that it lasts, and whether or not you go through the DSM-5 and say, I check all these boxes.
Yeah, I definitely see that because on one hand, like the verses and the chorus switch between the second person and the first person, where like the verses seem to be a lot more of this like bigger idea of like you're singing it towards somebody, and the chorus I think is very like hyper personal and specific, and also very vulnerable in a way because it's hitting on that idea of, well, like, am I the one that's the odd one out here? And I think that also acts sort of like as a way of connecting the audience to you and your work together, because it lets people know that, oh, you're not the only one who's stuck feeling like this. Whether it is just like, oh, I'm just going through a singular rough time, or I'm going through like an actual like depressive episode and I need professional help. I think both parties are able to relate to it on a pretty interesting level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the vulnerability of it, I almost didn't. I almost didn't take it to my producer friend Kenny, because it was so vulnerable, and I was like I don't want people to worry about me. I don't. This is just. This is like a lot. That I was. I almost didn't. I almost didn't produce it for that reason. But when I brought it into the studio, he seemed to like it, and we went forward with it, and now it exists. So vulnerability does have some value.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about the vulnerability of this. Just because how, like you said that you were thinking about not releasing it because it was very vulnerable. Where do you sort of draw the line between I'm giving like myself to the audience versus I want to keep this part of it sectioned off just for me?
That's something that I'm still working on, and I imagine I will be working on for the duration of my career, especially since my day job is in childcare and teaching lessons mainly to children. So I have to make sure I keep it a degree of child friendly in case like the kids or the parents find my stuff. I'm like not trying to keep like these lives separate because I know the internet, you know, you can find anything on the internet. So I have to keep that in mind.
The vagueness is pretty interesting because I think that's actually one of the strengths of the song, particularly in how it ends without resolving. You just hear that echo of "should I let it," and there's not really a definitive answer one way or the other. Talk a little bit about what led to that decision, both like musically and also thematically.
Yeah, so ending this poor earth wants to get rid of me, should I let it? That line is about the climate crisis, like literally like this earth wants to get rid of humans because we're polluting it. I think a lot of people can relate to um, those kinds of stressors like weighing on them at all times. There's only so much you can do, um, but that's always kind of on the back of your mind, and that's always on the back of my mind too. So I included it in the song. Um, and the "should I let it" part is like, should I give up, or should I keep trying to fight for my place on this earth? Part of it was I was thinking about having this be part of an EP, and the next track would be like an answer. The beginning of the next track would be an answer to that. And I'm still thinking I might do this, but it was my friend Marie, um, who is the girlfriend, fiance now of my producer Kenny.
Oh, wow. Congrats to Kenny and Marie.
Yeah, congrats to Kenny and Marie. And she was in the studio when we were working on it, and she was like, "Yeah, I think you should leave it open ended." So I was like, "Okay, cool." So she influenced me in that way. Yeah, it felt kind of corny to resolve it, so we just Kenny added some delay onto it, and that's how it ends.
Yeah. You mentioned like Kenny and Marie were both collaborators for the song there. What do you think the collaborative process brought to this that was originally lacking when it was just you putting this out and working on it?
Um, I definitely at the time and still now didn't have the skills as a producer to make this song what it is. Kenny was really good about bringing out the best vocal performance and also guiding me through the process of tracking the piano, tracking the bass. Kenny had influence in how the drums worked. If it were up to me, I would have had like a much more simplistic drum pattern, but he had his drums were like had like a little bit more complexity to them, and some more variation during the bridge. Just being in the studio with him, I learned a lot. It was a nice collaborative process. I felt at first I was like I didn't really understand the role of producer and like the role of the artist, and I felt like I was giving my song away to him, and I was like, this isn't really mine anymore because he's doing so much of this like studio work. But then in talking to more artists and talking to more producers, I found out like that's just how it is for the most part, except for like people like Jacob Collier. um, Most people don't do everything.
Gotcha. It's interesting that you brought up the drums because I made like two notes when I was like re-listening to this song. Was that the drums and I think the piano solo that like happens after like the first chorus. Those are what I felt like adds a lot of character to the song and gives it like it pairs really well, I think, with the theme that you were trying to go for there. What was like the intention behind choosing both like the piano and the drums there?
My vision for it was I wanted the drums to be crunchy and processed, and I didn't want them to sound like real drums. I wanted them to sound very lo-fi. I wanted to have like a very lo-fi feel. So that was the thing that drove all of the decisions.
Okay. Um, Also, like we sort of touched on this earlier, but the song oscillates between the second person when you're singing the verses and the first person when you're singing in the chorus there. When you're like writing this, who did you think you were sort of writing this for?
Well, most of it was me writing. I'm singing just about myself. I had a lot of trouble actually writing the second verse, um, and it just clicked one day. It was inspired by real life events and about a person. That realization that I found it was the thing that motivated me to get into the studio to finish writing and to finish the song.
Yeah, I definitely think like that goes back to like the universality of it. Like if you ask me like what, or I think like a lot of people probably wouldn't think of climate crisis or like, oh, this is like a like personal, this is toward a person. If you were like trying to say like, oh, what's this about? So I think like it's really interesting how like making it that hyper specific is able to blend and make it like even more relatable to a larger audience. I did want to talk about so the song itself is actually pretty short at just like 2 minutes and 48 seconds. Is that assuming that's like a little bit more normal for the lo-fi genre?
I was thinking about maybe adding an intro, but we never did to make it longer, or like an outro. I think it stands well alone. Um, and this was unintentional, but shorter songs do better nowadays because of streaming platforms. You're able to get more streams in a shorter amount of time. It worked out, I guess, in that way. And also leaving it unresolved when it loops and you go back into the beginning, it's like looping right back into the resolution. So that's also cool.
Yeah, definitely. No, this is definitely a song made for the streaming age. I did want to ask about the lack of intro, just because it's sort of in contrast with like the other songs that I like heard you put out, and that's like on your Spotify, where like you sort of like let the listener just like ease into it for a second or like establish like the instrumentation. This one is about as close to in media res as you can get. What was the idea behind that?
The idea behind that was I had every intention to putting an intro, and then I think it slipped my mind as we kept working on it. Yeah, I just got used to no intro, and that's I just forgot to put an intro, but it worked out, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, well, what's really striking about this when I was like thinking about it is that it's a really short song, like, lack of intro, lack of outro and all that, but it's incredibly dense. Just in terms of like, the production, I think like has a huge significance. The lyricism is like there's in terms of like words in the song, I don't think there's a lot, but I think each of them is like playing like the sum of the parts a lot better, or the whole better than the sum of the parts there. What was the idea behind like, oh, okay, I'm satisfied with like this dense of a project here, and I think like I can put that one out, and people will be able to get like enough meaning from it on like multiple plays.
Honestly, I wasn't really thinking about it too hard. This was around the time when I decided that I was going to pursue being a musician. Um, a lot of my life leading up to this moment was like, what am I going to do with my life? Um, I always thought that I was going to have to go to college and then eventually, like, have a couple odd jobs here and there and then settle down and have an office job. A lot of my life leading up to October 2020 was just, what am I going to do with my life? And then someone asked me, if you could be doing anything, what would you want to be doing? And I was like, I want to be a music producer. I would want to be a musician. Um, and so I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to invest in myself. Earlier that month, I booked my first gig, um, playing live at a restaurant. And then I was just like, okay, I did that. What's the next thing I can do? I have this song that I'm working out. I can put it out. It was mixed and I had a couple revisions, but I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go for it. I got it mastered and I had artwork for it. I was like, all right, this is all the stuff. I had been researching music distributors and I was like, it's now or never, let's do it. Um, and so yeah, I just put it out without much look into a marketing plan or a release strategy, and it was very exciting.
I mean, like, I think the fact that it's got, as of now, 11,834 plays on Spotify alone, which is like pretty impressive for independent music artists for like in 1 year. But I think like that speaks to just like how compelling it was that like it got a lot of organic traction without like, a paid marketing strategy behind it.
I think that's the thing that I need to embody that I lost with my second two releases. Like I was with my third release, I was really worried about having a proper strategy that I ended up doing a lot less than I actually did for Hazy. Um, so I think I just need to, I just need to be like, screw it, I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah, hand to mouth.
Hmm.
I did want to talk a little bit about like speaking of your other projects. The lo-fi sounds like a little bit of an outlier in terms of everything else that you've put out. Do you have any plans to bring that back for any future releases?
Yeah, my newest single, These Wheels, has a more electronic sound.
That's cool. Well, I'll be pre-saving that song soon. Did you have you performed Hazy live yet?
I have not. No, I have. I performed it live before it was even released, I think. Um, I believe I performed it at Rada's, the show that I did in October.
Okay, that's cool. So I wanted to ask, like, how does like the live performance differ from the recorded performance? Because it's like so influenced by like that like virtual instrument sound.
Yeah, I performed it on my keyboard, so it had that electric keyboard feel, but there were no drums. I think it was just me and my keyboard. I'm gonna be releasing um, an acoustic version of Hazy sometime soon, as part of my super big lead up to the fact that I'm releasing Hazy merch.
I think we just got some breaking news right here. Can we confirm what merch will be dropping soon?
Um, no, we cannot. But
Okay.
I um, I have requests for hoodies, t-shirts, um, maybe hats, and tank tops. Maybe it's a lot of items for my first release, so I think I'm gonna try to cut it down as much. But definitely hoodies, definitely t-shirts, and definitely stickers.
Okay.
And I'm
So
gonna
you
be doing. I thought of this today. I'm gonna be doing a giveaway. Um, so if you follow me and repost on your story and tag me, I'll enter you in a giveaway for an item of your choosing.
okay? I think we just keep breaking news after news right here. This is insane, and I hope everybody listening will be running to their Instagram stories right now, trying to get that viral merch drop.
Oh yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Supreme got nothing on us right now.
Limited edition.
Limited edition. Can't get this at
Limited
the
edition.
H&M.
Mm-hmm. Can't get it anywhere else. I mean, in a couple months, you probably won't even be able to get it here.
That's true. Okay. So y'all better run to your keyboards fast. You don't know when this is gonna run out. We got supply chain issues, y'all.
We do. We really do.
All right. Uh, so I did want to hit on so like primarily this song does feel like it's focused a lot on mental health. Where do you think music plays in terms of the self-care process for your listeners?
Music definitely is a release for me, writing or listening to music. But sometimes when I'm depressed, honestly, I just like to listen to podcasts because I end up comparing myself to the musicians too much. But that's another story. But um, I definitely think my music is healing and is comforting. I wrote another one of my songs, Wouldn't You Rather, when I was very anxious about finals. I think my voice is calming. I think the style of music is just nice to listen to. It's not aggressive. Um, you know, easy listening music, like elevator music. But
I think it's like a little bit better than elevator music. So this is like a fan service, but like literally just for me type question. So I wanted you to listen to Lust by Kendrick before this, just because like when I was trying to think of songs, I don't listen to lo-fi too much. I like put on like a little study music here and there. But when I was trying to think of a song that I felt like matched Hazy, like thematically. I was just thinking, well, Lust is also a song that's like a lot about malaise, and I think like struggling with apathy there.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was just thinking about your thoughts on that, and also like who do you like? What do you feel like was your musical influences when it came to Hazy there?
I definitely saw some of the similarities. I was like, but I couldn't really pinpoint a lyric that I could be like, this lyric is akin to this lyric. But it was like you said, it was more about the overall theme. One thing I will say about Lust is, judging from the title, is a lot more sexual. Um, and, you know, that's what I have to say on that. I think it's interesting that you brought it up because I would have never compared Hazy to Lust if you hadn't brought it up. So that was
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's one of those things where I was like, oh, this sounds nothing like absolutely nothing alike.
yeah.
But I think like it's interesting to see like two different artists explore like essentially the same feeling through like their like known like mediums. In his case, rap. In your case, like lo-fi music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like going back to I think what is probably the better question is what do you feel like was your influences when it came to making Hazy?
Um, Influences. I don't think I was directly influenced by anything. In a way, I was a little bit inspired by Dodie, the way she writes lyrics, how they're not always on the beat and they're like, you know, it's like a little bit more nebulous. Um, then up until that point, I had been writing very metric lyrics and lyrics with a lot of words in them and like a lot of um, strophic stuff. So I was trying to do the opposite of that and write something with a lot more space in between. And it's just an exploration of that. Because it was 1 a.m. and I wasn't really like thinking, like, oh, I need to write something so I can release it. I was just like, this is just for me. This is just a diary entry, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely comes across there. One thing that I wanted to go back to a little bit was you mentioned how you're trying to make your songs that way they're like more family like friendly and like kid friendly and stuff. And but what I thought was really interesting is this is a song that's inherently adult, as in like it's about adult problems. And I think like it has a relatability of that aspect where I think it would have been if it was like a little bit more explicit, for example, or like less like parental friendly. I think it would have lost a bit of an element there. How much of like your how much of your audience are you thinking about when you're writing these songs here in terms of like who it's going to reach, who might be alienated by like the lyrics or the production?
Honestly, when I first wrote Hazy, I thought no one was gonna get it. Because
That's really funny.
it was so it was so personal to me. I thought no one was gonna get it. I was just like, these are my problems. This is my depression. Like, but it ended up being pretty universal. And about it being kid friendly, I wouldn't really say it's kid friendly. The one kid who I talk to, who's the kid I babysit, he doesn't really like it that much. He's like, it's just like hazy, so slow. And I'm like, all right, that's fair. Um, but I do think these are kid problems. There are kids out there who have suffered traumatic experiences, who have mental illnesses, who have depression, and the climate crisis is a problem for the next generation. Um, you know, the older people aren't going to be around much longer to deal with it, but like the next generation is going to have to deal with the repercussions of the climate crisis. So I don't think it's not a kid problem, but it's like it's not something that would be marketed towards kids because generally kid products have lighter topics.
Yeah, don't really see this being jammed to at a lot of like middle school dances and stuff. So you mentioned Dodie as one of your artistic influences there. I think like some of your other work sort of has like that little more restraint, I think, that she shows in her songs. Like she's like a very talented singer, but I saw it like listed as somebody said she sings in like 11-point font.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm wondering, like, is that in terms of like how you choose to like go big versus like stay contained? Uh, what goes into that thought process?
You're asking questions, and I'm just like, I've never thought about this before. It's just, it's just a vibe. It's just like
Okay.
I wanted to start, hazy, you could call it lazy. That's all in the speaking register.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, the next thing I want to raise it a little bit. Doesn't everybody feel that way? That's a little higher. And then this for earth wants to get rid of me. I was like, just I wasn't thinking about it consciously, but I was like, this has to build. This has to go somewhere. Um, and then I was like, where do you go from there? And I'm just like, should I let it? Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, you're saying that you're not like thinking about this that much, but like that's like legitimately a journey right
Yeah,
there.
it's
So
just I don't know, it's just intuitive for me, I guess.
yeah, okay. You're just going off the top of the dome. All right, stun on everybody. I see it. Okay. I did want to ask, so like with 3 single drops under your belt now, what advice would you give like an artist who's just trying to start out?
I'd say just do it. Just put your stuff out there, and then you'll, with each release, you get better. All the information is out there on the internet. I'm part of this group called Connecting the World Through Music, and we are an indie artist collective with members all around the world. And basically, we were formed to be a hub of connectivity for you to like ask your questions to other artists who are going through the same thing as you. And it was all started by my friend Hannah, who is um, who is a student at the LA College of Music, and she's a business major, and she wanted to provide the indie artist community with the resources that she has at her school. It's a really cool opportunity, and you should join our Discord.
Okay. Is there a link or something that
Yeah,
they can?
I'll put a link in whatever
All
um,
right.
this is.
Cool. So you guys heard it here. If you're trying to get started, join Indie Artist Collective.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
connecting the world through music.
Connecting the world through music.
Mhm.
Okay, that's cool. In terms of like resources that are available online for the lone wolves out there, do you have any places you can point them?
Um, I don't know. I just start googling stuff.
Okay. All right. First page of Google.
Also, if you have a distributor, there's a lot of different indie music distributors that you can pick from. I use DistroKid. DistroKid has a lot of resources. That's a good place to start, is finding a distributor, because a lot of the distributors have materials that you can look at.
Cool. Think a lot of people will be checking that out after this. Um, so I did want to ask in terms of like the skill set that you've acquired over this past year. So you've been producing your own music, collaborating with some other artists to put out some of your stuff, songwriting throughout. What were like some skills that you think developing were like was really useful?
So I learned some technical skills in regards to producing. Before I started this, I just mostly used GarageBand. Um, and I learned how to use Logic. I learned how to produce, mix and master, a couple things. My skill set isn't too deep there because I did take a bunch of breaks, a bunch of mental health breaks. So I wasn't constantly grinding. But that's important too. A big thing that I'm gonna have to continue to work on is balancing music and life. When I would get into a music routine, I wouldn't take into account that I had to do life things. Seeing it as a big picture of like, I'm not just a musician, I'm a person, and I gotta take care of the person as well. that was a really big skill.
Yeah, I did want to get to like how you balance mental health and also being sort of like self-governed. Because essentially when you're starting out as an artist, you're like a small business owner, and you are the business. So like on one hand, you want to be doing well, you want to be putting out some great stuff for everyone to hear. But on the other hand, you don't want to like stress yourself out too much or like burn yourself out and then suddenly have uh, that sort of be in shambles there. Have you found any tips to like balance between the two and be able to sort of segment your different lives properly?
I haven't drank in a really long time, and I'm sure that helps. Just giving yourself grace and not falling into the grind set. You need to have a balance. Yes, sure, you can grind away and be really good at the thing you're trying to grind at, but the big picture of it, you sacrifice so much of the rest of your life. Like, is it even really worth it? And when you're first starting out, having perspective is really important. Like, I would get really frustrated that I wasn't already at the place that I wanted to be after like a few weeks of like working really consistently, and then I would fall off it, and then I would get back on it. But having perspective and just knowing that this takes time, and doing a little bit every day really does make a big difference.
Okay, that's awesome. I think our listeners will definitely be able to take a lot away from that. Sort of on that topic, though, I think one thing that a lot of people struggle with, especially when they're starting out, is trying to maintain the discipline to actually get their work done. So, do you have any advice for aspiring artists on how to like maintain a consistent routine structure?
I'm honestly, I'm working on this as well. I found that I really miss the structure of school. So I've been,
Listen, as somebody in grad school right now, no, you don't. You really
well,
don't.
no, I miss the structure of it. I don't
Okay.
miss the actual workload. um, a lot of brain power goes into planning. So what I did was a couple weeks ago, I decided to make school for myself, and I separated each of the disciplines that I want to get better at into classes. So I have voice class, I have piano class, I have guitar class, I have music business class, and I have music production class. So those are my 5 classes. And every week I have to write up a report about what I learned. And every day, because practicing instruments is a daily thing, I write down like what I've practiced, um, like like what time I practiced, what I did, um, and just like for me so far, and I think this is gonna pay off.
Okay, that actually sounds like a really useful routine. So I'm sure like a lot of people will be able to derive some good information from that. So we're sort of like coming toward the end. So I just wanted a couple things in terms of like reflection of where do you like see yourself advancing toward? Like in say like 5 years, 10 years. Um, if that's not a fun question, we can just throw that away and immediately like cut.
I like to have grown my following. I like to be continuing to release music, but honestly, I'm pretty flexible as long as I'm making a sustainable income and not hating my life. If I choose to pursue a field that's not music, I don't know what that would be. Maybe like nannying or something. I really like working with kids. Um, Something like that. Originally, when I decided not to go to grad school, it was with the intent of, um, just taking a gap year or a gap couple of years and then going. So maybe that's something, maybe music therapy, grad school is something I'll pursue down the line. But the world is my oyster.
Okay,
As long
definitely.
as it doesn't get rid of me first.
Well, one thing about pearls is they last forever, right? They're unbreakable. Yeah, because like you can't break a pearl. It's like a diamond.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's why like when they kill Batman's parents and stuff, you always see the pearl necklace like fall, but it doesn't never shatters. That's very on topic right now. Yeah. The last thing, so the last thing I wanted to end with, which I think is a fun question. All right. So as I understand, you have not yet submitted Hazy for the Grammy nomination. And you know, I understand it's like it's political right now. You got like Adele's about to drop. You don't want to crowd out her thunder. Olivia Rodrigo is just starting. That's, you know, I really respect this decision. But you know, why don't you, what would you give if as your speech if you know, I'm just trying to prepare you for when you eventually do win you know, record of the year.
Okay,
But
first of
yeah.
all, I don't think it's eligible because I released it in 2020.
No, it's a year-long cycle. So like the things that are getting released right now, like Adele's not going to be eligible for next year's Grammy. She'll be eligible for the 2023.
What?
So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The so you just made the year cutoff
Damn.
for the
Okay.
start. Yeah. And again, like I recognize the artistic decision. You're like, let Kanye, let Drake, let Olivia, let them duke it out. You know, I respect that. But you know, for when eventually you do drop in consideration. Let's hear that speech.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This is the exact head motion I'm gonna be doing.
All
Thanks.
right.
I'm really grateful to be here. Shout out to my grandma for singing Ave Maria to me when I was a baby. That really started it all. Shout out to my grandpa for playing Chopin when I was also a baby and growing up. That really started it all. Um, Shout out to all my piano teachers, Mrs. Kanzler, Eric, Dr. Kanemaru. Shout out to my parents for being really supportive all the time, believing in me, not kicking me out of the house when I told them I wanted to be a musician. Um, yeah, and everybody else, amen.
You did not get to Marie or Kenny at all
Oh
in
yeah, shout
the
out
Grammy you're accepting for Casey. Your two collaborators, they're on stage with you in this scenario.
to Marie for being there in the studio. Shout out to Kenny for producing. Shout out to Liam for mastering and inspiring me. Seeing your stories on Instagram is what gave me the balls to be like, I could do this. Shout out to Josh for making me realize that the cutoff date wasn't too late. Um, Shout out to pianos for existing.
All right. I think that's great there. Thanks for watching. Be sure to follow Lana Holgado on all platforms. Follow Kenny and Liam on all their platforms, and follow Marie also for having an important part of this production process.
Yeah. Follow Josh Kumar. Did you ever introduce yourself?
Uh, no, I just said I'm here. You can follow me on Twitter. I post some fire tweets that nobody likes.
I don't really use Twitter.
Yeah.
If I did, I would like your tweets, Josh.
Cool. I don't take offense. Uh, I know how big my following is, and I'm comfortable with that.
If you need prep, if you need test prep,
If you need test prep, don't come to me. I'm like actually fully booked right now. If you want a tutor for the SAT or the ACT,
yeah, if you want a job, if you
yeah,
want employment,
if you want a job,
you be gainfully employed.
Flexible. I pay generously.
How much do you pay?
Starting pay is 20 an hour.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Thanks for answering my questions. Have a good one, guys.